and welcome to Cooking with Miss KW, the part of your week where you get to watch your teacher make a mess of her kitchen and maybe make something delicious. So today we are going to be making rhubarb cake because one of my friend's moms gave me a lot of rhubarb, and another one of my friend's moms has a delicious recipe for rhubarb cake that I love to make. But I live by myself, as you might know, and I cannot eat a whole cake by myself before I get sick of it. You can only eat so much cake, actually. So I'm going to make half a batch of rhubarb cake. So I have my original recipe, which I will put here, perhaps, and also in the comments. But I need to half the recipe. So that means that I need to multiply all of the ingredients by half so that I don't have a lot of cakes, but I just have half of a cake in the end that'll bake in a smaller pan. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I have a whiteboard here. Usually if I had the recipe printed out, I would just write next to it, but it's on my computer. So first, we're going to have to mix together brown sugar and the shortening, which in this case is going to be butter. So the original recipe calls for 1 1/4 cups of brown sugar, but I want half of that. So what I'm going to do is multiply 1 1/4 by half. That's the same thing as dividing by 2. So there are 2 ways that I could do this. First, I can turn this fraction, I can turn 1 1/4 into an improper fraction. And that's the way that I'm going to do first. So 1 1/4 is the same thing as 5/4. 1 1/4 is the same thing as 5/4 or 5/4. And the way that I did that was I just multiplied 4 times 1 is 4, and then added 1 to get 5, so 5/4. Or you can think about it like there are 4/4 in a whole, 4 quarters in a whole, and then you have 1 more quarter, and that makes 5/4. 5/4. So the original recipe calls for 5/4 cup of brown sugar, but I want half of that. So I'm going to do 5/4 times 1/2. And when we're multiplying fractions, we just multiply the numerators and then we multiply the denominators. So 5 times 1 is 5, and 4 times 2 is 8. So that means that I need 5/8 of a cup of brown sugar. So that may be a little annoying when I'm measuring. So I might estimate a little bit with my baking. And you'll see that is oftentimes what I do. But we know that I want about 5/8 of a cup of brown sugar. And then for the butter. Okay, so it calls for 1/2 cup of shortening, which is going to be butter. So 1/2 cup is 1 stick of butter. And I love working with butter when it's like this because it is really helpful. It tells you it's all broken up into fractions, really, and then into tablespoons. So we can read here that it says there are 8 tablespoons in 1/2 cup, which is 1 stick of butter. We want half of that. So what you could do is just cut it in half, right? Or we could figure out 1/2 times 1/2 equals 1/4. So we want 1/4 cup of butter, which we can see here. Even on the butter, it says 4 tablespoons equals 1/4 cup. So we know that we want 4 tablespoons. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we figured that out, and the butter and the brown sugar are going to get mixed together first. I'm waiting for my butter to soften so that it's easier to mix together. Then next, it calls for 1 egg. Okay, this is a kind of tricky situation. It's really hard to put just half of an egg into something. So I'm gonna do a little experiment. I'm just gonna put a whole egg in. I'm not going to half the egg, and we're gonna see what happens, okay? But 1 egg times a half, if we were going to do it, would just be half of an egg. Next, the recipe calls for 1 cup of sour milk. And if you have milk at home or bad milk at home, you could use that. You could also, if you just have normal milk, you could add some lemon juice or vinegar to the milk and make it like sour milk. What I'm actually gonna do, I have a little experiment, so we'll see how this goes. I have yogurt. I have a lot of yogurt because I make it. And you can also sometimes use yogurt as a replacement for sour milk, especially if it's not too thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using my yogurt in place of sour milk. If the cake turns out good, I will let you know, and maybe you could use yogurt as well. So if the original recipe calls for 1 cup of sour milk, or in this case yogurt, I will be using half a cup of sour milk. Same thing with the baking soda. It calls for 1 teaspoon of baking soda, so that would be half a teaspoon of baking soda that I'll be using. For a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, that's going to end up being 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, which really, I have an 1/8 measuring spoon, but I might just do a little pinch. Same thing. 2 cups of flour times a half. I can write that one out. Because, so 2 times a half, 2 is the same thing as saying 2 over 1. So then, you can still multiply just like you already know how to do. 2 times 1 is 2, and 1 times 2 is 2. So we have 2 halves. What is that the same as? 2 over 2 is a whole, or 1. So we just need 1 cup of flour. Then the next part is the rhubarb. I have my rhubarb right here already chopped up. And the recipe says that you can use between 1 3/4 cup and 2 cups of rhubarb that's cut up. I was given a lot of rhubarb. I have a whole pan in my freezer that I am freezing. So I have a lot more rhubarb. So I'm gonna go with 2 cups of rhubarb. So like we just did with the flour, half of 2 is 1. So I'm just gonna need 1 cup of rhubarb. And then last thing is 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and half of 1 is a half. So I'll just need half a teaspoon of vanilla. And so we're going to mix all of these ingredients together. And this is the part where it's going to speed up, or we're going to cut forward to me having a cake. So the cake is done. It's still warm. I should probably wait. I'm not going to. I'm just going to cut into it to see how it is. Let's see. Here it goes. Yep. Delicious. I think it is. Rhubarb is quite tart, but I think it is yummy. So I would recommend this. Have fun cooking, and I will see you later.